Very proud and honored to welcome to talkSPORT for the first time Dan Graziano. If you watch ESPN, of course you watch ESPN, get up. You are very familiar with his name, with his face. Dan, how's it going, man?
Good, Brian. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us. This is the first time we're doing this. Hopefully, it is the beginning of a long relationship. And
Sure.
we're a couple of weeks away from the NFL season. There is so much to get into, and you don't worry if you have to check your phone while this is going on because you get breaking news about Trey Hendrickson being traded.
Yeah. I
Have
don't
at
think
it.
there's any rush on that, but yeah, for sure.
So let's start there, Dan.
hmm
The Bengals weren't good enough last year. That was documented on quarterback in the Netflix series. Joe Burrow played like an MVP, but the defense was iffy all season. They know they don't want to start slow, and how are they answering that? By getting into a really messy contract stalemate with one of the best defenders in the NFL. How does this get resolved? And is there any shot that Trey Hendrickson really does get traded? And if he gets traded, who's he going to?
I think a trade is going to be tough at this point because so far the Bengals have asked for a lot when teams have called. You're talking about a first round draft pick and a player. And then if you're the team that gives that up, you now have a 30-year-old edge rusher that wants a new contract. So you're going to have to give the Bengals a high pick, a player, and give the player that you're getting a brand new, very expensive contract. And even back in March, there weren't a ton of teams lining up to do all that. And now, as you mentioned, a couple weeks before the season starts, teams have pretty much salary capped out, and their budgets kind of keep them from acquiring a great big new contract. We've seen it. There have been times in the past where it happened this late, but I'm thinking back to like Khalil Mack when he got traded from the Raiders to the Bears right before. But it's tough, and I think it's going to be difficult to execute a trade. Now, the fact that this has come up again here the last couple of days, the idea that they're having trade conversations could mean a couple of different things. One, it could mean that Trey and his agent are trying to, goose something to get it done. I'm not trying to guess at people's sources or anything like that, but it could also mean that the team is kind of floating it to kind of remind him, like, hey, man, you don't have another option. Like we have had you out there. We have had conversations. We can't find the team that will give us what we think you're worth and also pay you the contract. So why don't you come back and listen again to our offer, which, as I understand it, is a 1-year extension beyond 2025 for, $36 million, something like that, which puts him ahead of Daniil Hunter of the Texans, but behind like the TJ Watts, Myles Garrett's, those guys. So that's what they've been willing to do. They don't like to guarantee the Bengals. They don't like to guarantee money in future years. They made an exception for Joe Burrow and one for Jamar Chase, but that's it. And that's been where the standoff has been. So someone, in answer to your first question, what has to happen? Somebody's got to change their position, and the Bengals seem pretty resolute in theirs.
Let's stick on defense for a second. Another team that's trying to be a contender. I don't think it's going to happen. That has a star player who's one of the best defenders. I know you know where I'm going with this, with the best defenders in the NFL. And he wants to be traded, but he's still around the team. We're talking contracts. We're talking Jerry Jones on Dallas Cowboys. You've covered this. You've been in the middle of all of this. Where does it go with Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys, and how do they find a way to either get Micah Parsons on the field or do the unthinkable, trade Micah Parsons?
Yeah, at this point, they're still insistent that they won't trade him. He's got 1 year left on his contract, and then they can franchise him in 26, and they could franchise him in 27 if it came to that. That's the stance the Cowboys are taking. This is a weird situation, Brian, because it's got personal somehow. Like all these Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, all these others that have happened the last couple of years with the Cowboys, they always got done at the end, and everybody always felt like they were. But this one's strange, and it may be because the player is a little different. And he's more sort of outspoken and sort of out publicly in terms of, saying what's on his mind than a lot of players have been. But for some reason, Jerry Jones seems very angry. He really feels like they had a deal agreed to in March and that Micah effectively went back on it when he said, I got to talk to my agent, which is ridiculous. That's what any player in that situation should say. It's what I would say if the Walt Disney Company and ESPN made me a contract offer. There's a reason we're paying the agent. So, but they're stuck. And so right now they're saying they won't trade him. If a team calls, the Cowboys' answer basically is we're not trading him. And the team says, all right, well, something changes, keep us in money. But the Cowboys are taking the position that they expect him to show up and play because he's under contract. If he doesn't, if he's willing to sit out real games, then I think the leverage swings back toward him a little bit. And maybe you can force the Cowboys to do something they're not comfortable with contract-wise or consider a trade. But right now, the Cowboys have to be 100% convinced he's willing to do that. And the only way to convince the team you're willing to do that is to actually do it. So we'll see, about 10 days from now when the Thursday night opener against the Eagles, we'll see if Mike is on the field or not.
Last year, Dak Prescott signed his monster deal, record-setting deal, right before the season started. Do you think Micah, because he's an interesting guy, he's unique, he's social media savvy, does Micah Parsons have it in him to actually miss time to stay off the field? Do you believe it could go that far? Or is he...
Good question.
Is Jerry being Jerry, but Micah Parsons is also playing the media game and bluffing?
Yeah, it's possible, right? Like this is like the boss level for Jerry in terms of like he's finally found, met his match in terms of these negotiations, somebody who's willing to do it publicly as he is. The difference between this and the Dak Prescott situation last year is you felt like there were conversations going on with Dak Prescott. And I don't get that feeling here. I think the Cowboys have said, we agreed to something in the spring. If you want to take that deal, fantastic. But if you want to talk about, rearranging it, then, we don't think that's right. We think they're going back on something. So again, not saying they're right and he's wrong, but that's the position the team is taking right now. And that's why I don't think sort of a Hail Mary last-second deal like Dak Prescott did is in the cards, unless, again, almost like we said with Hendrickson, Micah Parsons changes his position and just kind of goes back to them and says, all right, tells his agent, yeah, just do the deal we're talking about. I want this over with.
So we're not talking about as much now, but the biggest story of the NFL offseason for me was Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers in that long wait. Two parts, Dan. Number one, what are you hearing from Steelers camp right now about how it's actually going with Rodgers on the field? And number two, let's say, worst case, Aaron Rodgers looks a little old and Aaron Rodgers is not ever going to be Green Bay Aaron Rodgers again. Is there any point this season, whether, the NFL is coming to Dublin for the first time, huge game, Vikings and the Steelers, is there any point where the Steelers move on from Aaron Rodgers? Because at some point, if it's not going to work this year, they have to figure out some way to start developing a quarterback, even though they probably don't have that quarterback on the roster. But, the worst spot in the NFL is to be 7 wins, 8 wins. Like, they're better off, if they can't with Aaron Rodgers, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're better off going young and losing this year because it's going to be a loaded quarterback draft next year.
Yeah, it's easy for you and me to say that, but the Steelers, Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. And the Steelers don't like to operate that way. They're not going to go into a full rebuild. They feel like they're one of these sort of old school mentality teams. And I have to agree with that mentality, by the way. Like, people are paying to see these games, right? Like, you should be trying to win them all. So I think that's the way the Steelers look at it, and rightfully so. And they've been a team in recent years that has outperformed some expectations, but they get to the first round of the playoffs and they lose. So can Aaron Rodgers change that? Probably not. It's been a long time since he won any playoff games, but it became the best of a slate of poor options for them. And your question's a good one, because when this was all going down in the spring, my thought was like, what happens if he stinks? Like, is Mike Tomlin going to be able to bench him? And is that a conversation like that sounds like a difficult conversation to have with a difficult person in Aaron Rodgers. So I have heard positive. You hear a lot of positive things this time of year.
It's a time of hope. It's a time of hope.
But checking with people in Pittsburgh, they feel good about the way it's coming together. Some of the young receivers, Roman Wilson, who was a high draft pick for them last year, didn't play much. He's apparently come on a little bit stronger. So they feel pretty good about that. You have a young offensive line that's still coming together. So there are some questions to answer. But in terms of Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, and how they're collaborating to bring everything together, it sounds like it's all positive. So, we will see. He rode with Russell Wilson through the tail end of last year when it seemed like that wasn't working. And Mike Tomlin does seem to value loyalty and promises. And if he's told Aaron Rodgers he gets the whole year, then he probably does.
A spin around the NFL with Dan Graziano from ESPN. You can follow him watch him every morning on Get Up. He's one of the best NFL reporters in the business. uh, the most fascinating player for me is Travis Hunter out of all the
Same.
rookies. Cam Ward with the Titans, and you can go down the list, Ashton Jeanty with the Raiders, but Travis Hunter, the talk coming from him, coming from the Jaguars, we might see something that we've never seen in NFL history. However, he's got to be on the field and he's got to be healthy, and that's currently a bit of a question mark. What's going on with Travis Hunter right now, and is there any concern from the Jaguars, and do they have to pick a position? I mean, it's easy to say, hey, we want to do it all, but it doesn't matter if you're not on the field, Dan.
Right, and he had to miss their second preseason game due to a health issue, so that's a concern. Look, he is. I was at their training camp and talked to some of their decision makers about what the plan is, and the plan is to use him on both sides of the ball. But what they're using training camp for is to figure out how that's going to look, how much they can use him, how much offense they can give him, how much defense can they give him. Is he good enough at both that they can switch it up week to week depending on their own health situation, right? Like all of our receivers are hurt, we need him to play receiver this week, that kind of thing. Or maybe based on the matchup, like we're better off putting more receivers on the field this week or more corners on the field. So that's the ideal situation, is to get to a point where he knows the offense and the defense well enough and can play them well enough that you can really be interchangeable. That's where you have effectively an extra player every week, which is what they're thinking. They talk a lot about his conditioning and how he doesn't get tired and what a miracle that is. He trains at altitude. There's all these guys. But the flip side of that is he does struggle to keep weight on. He's not particularly large, and it is a large man's game. And so the concern would be, does he wear down once he starts taking hits, right? So I think we'll see, but it is alarming that he wasn't healthy enough to play in the second preseason game. There's no question about that. So if it's a minor thing and it's a training camp thing where they held him out and he's back to full practice this week, great. If not, then that factors in, right? Like they're using training camp to figure this all out. So it becomes another data point, right? We pushed him this hard in practice and he couldn't make the game. So maybe we need to back him off. And maybe right now we need to give him, fewer snaps on offense, fewer snaps on defense, a little bit fewer both, whatever that turns out to be. So assuming the injury is not severe enough to threaten the regular season, which I don't think at this point it is, then that becomes something else they can use in their evaluation of the plan as they continue to make it.
I don't know how it is in the U.S. It's been a few years since I've lived there. I've been back a few times since. But in the United Kingdom and London, clearly the most popular player in the world right now is Shedeur Sanders. Like we can't go a day without writing about Shedeur Sanders. And I know he's all over ESPN, even if in his jersey he's getting confused with Barry Sanders. Like it's crazy how big Shedeur Sanders is right now. Let's get into the insider's view of Shedeur Sanders, right? Because there's so much hype, there's so much talk. You had the draft fall. He's Deion's son. He's really talented. But the NFL, like the NFL is all about reality. NFL is all about what you do on the field, how it is in the locker room, what the coaches think, on and on and on. What is the reality, Dan, for Shedeur Sanders? And if he starts this year, when do you think it happens?
The reality is he's a 5th-round pick who was the second quarterback his team took in this year's draft. So the reality since he got there has been that he's been 4th on the depth chart at quarterback behind Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and Dylan Gabriel. He did start the first preseason game in large part because Pickett and Gabriel were injured, and they just don't feel like they need to put Flacco in a preseason game. He's 40 years old. They know what
he's elite. He's elite.
Why
he doesn't?
He's Flacco. Like he's what a career. There'll be the 30 for 30 on Flacco is going to be spectacular someday. But yes, the Shedeur played well in that first preseason game, but showed some, like any rookie would. Here's what he has to work on still. Here's what's exciting about him. He got back to practice last week and he got hurt. So that's a setback if you're trying to climb from 4th to 3rd to 2nd to 1st on the depth chart. At this point, it feels like they haven't announced anything yet. Maybe by the time people see this, they will have. But at this point, it feels like Flacco's most likely the week 1 starter there, just because by default, everyone else has had injuries and he's the most proven. So the question is, who's the backup, right? That the last couple of weeks of Browns training camp are going to be big on that. Who do we feel comfortable putting second on the depth chart in case Flacco gets hurt in the middle of the game? Somebody has to jump in. Are either one of the rookies ready to do that? Or is Kenny Pickett, who hasn't played a ton in the NFL and has been hurt this camp? So they have to figure that out as well. They have Tyler Huntley there too. So they got kind of a mess. Specifically to Shedeur, my understanding is, other than the speeding tickets, everything he's done since he got there has been pretty well received by the team, by his teammates, by the coaching staff. He hasn't, hasn't done anything to make them roll their eyes and say, "Oh, this guy thinks he's better." Yeah, like he's been working hard. He's saying all the right things. He's a fifth round pick trying to work his way up the depth chart. It's a depth chart that seems to present opportunity because so if he can get healthy and continue to put on tape some of the stuff he did in their first preseason game, yes, I think there's a chance he could move up the depth chart and start this year. They have 2 first-round picks next year. If they're thinking quarterback in next year's draft, it would behoove them to know what they have on their roster already. So it probably makes sense, unless they're in contention, for them to take a look at all these guys at some point this year.
All right, we'll make this one quick, but I do find this fascinating because the NFL is also about endless drama. The Miami Dolphins, Mike McDaniel, Tua, Tyreek Hill. It's quieted down a little. It was really hot. It felt a couple weeks ago, but you're still hearing talk that, teams are monitoring Tyreek Hill. And Tyreek Hill, by the time the trade deadline comes around, if the Dolphins are struggling or they're just a disappointment, that Tyreek Hill could be gone. How did it get this bad? And is there any way to salvage it? Or is Tyreek Hill, is this potentially his last year in Miami?
They used to say that winning is the greatest deodorant, right? Like if the Dolphins are 6-1, right, at some point, then I think everybody's going to be happy. They had a rough start last year. I believe they started 2-6 and then turned it around, won 6 of their next 8. And that was kind of like the coaching staff and the front office looked and said, like, who hung with us and who bailed on us? And then they made a lot of offseason decisions based on that.
Yeah.
They got rid of some people that weren't necessarily with the program. They brought in some guys, some of their free agent acquisitions, veterans like Willie Gay, linebackers like have like some reputation as locker room leader type. Tyreek seems to fall in the category of like, there were times last year where we weren't sure. So, but he's also a difficult guy to trade. So they haven't, they weren't able to do it to the extent that they tried. And they felt like, he wanted to reconcile, and that what you're seeing is they're working through it. And I don't know if they're sure that they're going to reach a good spot, but they're both, Tua and Tyreek and the coaching staff, all parties seem willing to try and put this back together, whatever, to the extent that it ever fell apart. So Tyreek had a wrist injury last year that hampered him somewhat. He didn't love the way he was always used in the offense. They probably used him as a decoy a little bit more than he would have liked, mainly because I think of the wrist injury. So we'll see. His contract's no easier to trade now than it would have been back in the spring. The best case scenario here is for him to be healthy, play well, and they win more games than we expect him to. If not, yes, I imagine you're absolutely right. As we approach the late October, early November trade deadline season, that's going to be a name we're looking at an awful lot.
Dan, we'll get you out of one more question. Really enjoyed it for the first time in talkSPORT. Where can everybody find you? Where can everybody find you on Twitter? What are you working on right now? Let's put your stuff out there into the United Kingdom. Twitter's
Dan Graziano, ESPN. I'm not as active on there as I used to be. Mainly,
wonder why.
Story. Yeah, well, that's a different topic for a different day. I'm on TV. I'm on ESPN. On Get Up, on SportsCenter, NFL Live. I write regularly for ESPN.com, especially in season. So various pieces there, notes from around the league, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much. Yeah, I don't even know my exact schedule for the fall yet. Oh, game. Sunday NFL Countdown. I'll be at a game every Sunday doing that. So you'll be able to see me on the field. If anybody's coming over to visit an NFL game at a stadium and you see me walking around down on the field, come say hi.
Fantastic. All right. We were talking on The Office today, and this was like whatever. I don't do Marvel and comic books, but this was like a Marvel what if. Okay, so let's just be negative for a second. Like, not that we ever do that in the United Kingdom media. So what if Travis Kelce, age has gotten to him, he wants to get married, he wants to make sourdough bread for the rest of his life with Taylor Swift. So this is his last year, maybe. Andy Reid decides, because he's hinted at retirement, Andy Reid decides he's done after this year, no matter what happens, good or bad. And the Chiefs dynasty is over. Like what we saw in Philly against the Eagles in the Super Bowl was actually the beginning of the end. What if we've all been operating like Patrick Mahomes is the next GOAT, he's the next Tom Brady, he's a lock for the Hall of Fame. But what if like this is the best it ever gets for Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City? Is there a scenario where Patrick Mahomes doesn't finish his career in Kansas City, or is he so locked in there with Britney, with the sports scene, that he is just a Chief for life? Because we always think it's going to work out, but I go back to Tom Brady. Like at one point, you would have thought Tom Brady would always say Joe Montana went to Kansas City, Peyton Manning, like Aaron Rodgers, Dan. None of the greats actually finished their career with their teams anymore. Nobody's talking about Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, but is it guaranteed that he ends his career in Kansas City?
I mean, of course, if you put it that way, it's not guaranteed. I mean, you just gave a whole list of guys that you would have thought at this stage of their careers that it would be, and it wasn't. So he signed through 2030 or 2031. He signed, I believe, beyond the length of the current collective bargaining agreement. He has built a contract that the Chiefs can constantly go get salary cap money out of.
Which is amazing, yeah.
Right. So he wants to be there for the rest of his career. You're right. He invested in the women's pro soccer team there. I believe he owns a piece of the Kansas City Royals.
Yep.
So like he's of the community. There's no question about it. So was Peyton Manning, right? like that does happen. But it's a long way off. Like Andy Reid hinted at retirement a couple of years ago because he was underpaid. And that has been rectified. So you don't hear that talk anymore. He was the third highest paid coach in his division after the Chargers hired Harbaugh and the Broncos hired Peyton. So
which is crazy.
Like, well, I win the division literally every year. Maybe I should be the highest paid. And they said, yeah. So that's all taken care of. And I think as long as Mahomes is there and healthy and playing well, Andy Reid will be, driven to. I mean, he got a chance with a couple more to maybe be considered the best there ever was, right? And
I was actually looking at Andy Reid's record. So no one's talking about Andy Reid. I mean, he's getting close. I don't think he'll get to the final Don Shula mark. Andy Reid's not that far off the list for the all-time coaching victories in NFL history.
So if he won one or two in Philadelphia, then maybe, but then he probably never goes to Kansas City. So, but anyway, yes, I think he's having a great time and conscious of that, and you talk about things unraveled pretty well for the Chiefs last year, and they still made the Super Bowl. Like Mahomes kind of carried them there. I don't think anybody there is of the mindset you're describing. It makes sense to look down the road and imagine these things. And of course, anything's possible. And as mentioned, we've seen it. But right now, I don't think they're viewing themselves as looking over the precipice of anything.
It's good to hear because they've been one of the best stories in recent NFL history. Yes. Dan, hopefully this is the start. We really appreciate you coming on. I know you're super busy. Thank you for joining us at talkSPORT, and hopefully we can talk to you in a couple of weeks, man.
Enjoyed it, Brian. Thanks a lot.